Welcome to Money Adventures with TK, a podcast for the ordinary African who's determined to get their personal finances right. Willing to have a better relationship with your money? Well, this podcast is for you. Marriage, divorce, matrimonial property. Big words that for the ordinary trailblazer can become quite overwhelming. In today's conversation, I've been wanting to have this guest on my podcast so that we can unpack everything, marital contracts, what happens when you get divorced. Should I get married in community of property or not? Or should I stay single like the rest of us? Hi guys, welcome to Money Adventures with TK. If you're new to the channel, my name is Tukiso TK Ntebe, and on this channel, I bring you fresh content on anything personal finance and business related content. So without wasting any more time, my guest this afternoon is an admitted advocate of the courts of law in Lesotho, who's also very passionate about legal research, litigation, monitoring, and evaluation. And she's currently a representative of Young Lesotho Lawyer Society Committee. And of course, she's interested in teaching communities and officers about the laws that regulate gender-based violence. So I won't tell you, she'll introduce herself. So beautiful lady, welcome to Money Adventures with TK. So first and foremost, tell the ordinary person who you are outside of all these accolades that I just mentioned.
Thank you so much, TK, for having me. Well, I'm a highly experienced litigant who is passionate about family law. I'll tell you why I'm so passionate about family law. Well, my legal career began in 2019, instantly after I obtained my LLB at the National University of Lesotho Faculty of Law. Well, initially, I was a criminal defense lawyer. And luckily enough, I was afforded an opportunity by an international non-governmental organization, usually referred to as WILSA, Women in Law in Southern Africa Research Trust. Yes. Those women inspired the love that was already hidden within me, the passion for family law. My role at the Women in Law in Southern Africa Research Trust was, amongst others, a family lawyer and a capacity builder. Yes, and they even gave me an opportunity to represent them in a project referred to as KB. It's a project funded by the American government through USAID and PEPFAR. So it deals predominantly with prevention and post-care services for violence against children and gender-based violence. So in a nutshell, Advocate Lerato Khutlang is this dynamite who's passionate about family law, yes, and human rights protection.
I love the energy. So
you.
Advocate Lerato, I'm going to call you Lerato because I do respect the title and it's a big thing.
Thank you.
But the one thing that when I was doing my research and you come very highly recommended.
Thank
so
you.
Well done to you, the work that you're doing. And I mean, beyond, over and above everything else, you've got a very impressive resume. Okay, so what I want you to share a bit about the work that you're doing through My Sister's Keepers movement and the International Extreme Sport. Maybe touch a bit on, not a bit, tell us about the work that you do through those different organizations or platforms.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, before I tell you about my role under the My Sister's Keepers movement project, firstly, I would like to give your viewers a brief background as to what is My Sister's Keepers movement to begin with. Yes. Well, My Sister's Keepers movement is a project funded by the American government through the US Embassy. Its mission is to eradicate and prevent gender-based violence through capacity building of stakeholders that are at the forefront of GBV prevention. So my role as an individual, I am a gender-based violence specialist, and my role is to capacitate those stakeholders. And so far, I've managed to capacitate the Lesotho Defense Force, the Lesotho Mounted Police Services, the Lesotho Correctional Services.
Girl, you're working.
Yes, and the Lesotho, the inmates, and the members of the Taxi Association, Bembadi, Makolo, Yabayet. Yes, and this project is implemented in Kuting, Leribe, and Maseru. Also, about my role under Lesotho, no. What's the question?
Yeah,
International Extreme Sports.
International Extreme Sport, yes.
Well, I'm actually a co-founder of International Extreme Sports. International Extreme Sports is a company that I incorporated with the International Youth Olympic leader, namely Advocate Lerato. We incorporated this company while we were in our third year of study at the Faculty of Law at the National University of Lesotho.
Okay.
So when we incorporated this company, well, we had actually enrolled for the BEDCO, Standard Bank, and LRA competition, the Bacha Entrepreneurship. Mind you, it was for graduates, and we were not graduates, but we decided to take a leap of faith.
Gangster.
Hey, unfortunately, we did not win.
We learned something from experience.
Absolutely. So that's when we decided, you know what, this is a good initiative. We might as well incorporate it into a company. So my role under International Extreme Sports, which trades as Lesotho Apogee Travel and which is registered as Mahakwe Sports and Travel Intelligence Unit, is that of providing legal advice to tourists. We ensure that tourists are well protected when they are in Lesotho. Their rights are protected and go to the last atom.
Did you see my smile? Because I mean, I'm seeing the synergy. We're talking money, but now you start talking travel. So I'm thinking my other channel, Escapes with TK. I'm like, travel money. Oh, I love this. I love this. So, okay, amazing work that you're doing again. But this is Money Adventures podcast, and we talk about money amongst other things. So what would you say is your relationship with money?
Money's my baby.
That's the first positive, one of the first positive reviews that I've seen. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, my perspective about money changed the moment after I read one of Robert Kiyosaki's literature, particularly Rich Dad and Poor Dad.
Yes, the famous one.
Yes. So after reading that book, I formed this perspective that money is neutral. You can buy assets and liabilities with it. Initially, I thought money was just an asset.
Sure.
But then when I read that book, I formed a different perspective altogether. Because I realized that even though you may have money as an asset, you may end up buying liabilities. And some people end up buying liabilities thinking that they are buying assets. I'm going to make a typical example of the majority of middle class people. They have, well, okay.
Please share.
Okay, some may end up buying this luxurious car, thinking that they are buying assets, only to find out that they're actually spending more money than the money that they are making from those vehicles. So in as much as it may seem like an asset at the face of it, it's actually a liability. So my relationship with money, I consider money as water. It's neutral as water. So you can channel it to become an asset, or you can channel it to become liability. So the choice is yours.
And the funny thing is, once those luxurious cars drive off the dealership floor, the depreciation on some of them is ridiculously high. So
Absolutely.
High. Okay, now that we are, so before we continue, we've decided to have a wine because the conversation is quite intense. Not too much wine so that we can still function, but a bit of wine just to calm the nerves. So the wine of the day is also a new feature on this. So this is the Warwick First Lady Cabernet Sauvignon from South Africa 2021. And of course, it's one of my favorite wines because Warwick is such a beautiful wine house. So usually it's a kind of serve, so it's better served and paired with red meats, if I'm correct. I'm not a wine connoisseur, I'm on my journey to become that. So this is what's keeping us company throughout this very important conversation. So we're talking marriage, we're talking divorce, we're talking matrimonial property. So first question for the day is, what constitutes a marriage in the Lesotho context?
Okay, before I answer your question, I should bring it to the attention of your viewers that Lesotho has a dual legal system, meaning that Lesotho has customary law legal system and Roman Dutch law legal system. And each legal system has its own marital regime. Under the customary law, we have customary law marriage. And under the Roman Dutch law, we have civil law marriage. And in order for us to say that TK has been officially married or legally married under customary law marriage, you have to meet 3 requirements.
Okay.
Firstly, there has to be an agreement between 2 families, the family of the bachelor and the bachelorette. They have to agree that now our daughter is getting married into this family, and now our son is marrying Lerato, you know. Secondly, there has to be an agreement between the potential spouses. They shouldn't be forced, like it used to happen back then. They have to consent. And thirdly, there has to be an agreement of bohadi. I want to emphasize this one. We are not saying that it's a requirement for bohadi to be paid for us to say that there is a legally binding marriage. We're saying there should be an agreement, because even you may even pay that bohadi 100 years later. Yeah. Yeah. But please don't get it twisted, guys.
Gonna get away with murder.
I know, right?
That's very interesting.
Hey, yes, and under the civil law, under the Roman Dutch law, particularly under the civil law marriage, well, we have quite a few requirements. Unlike in the customary law marriage, under the civil law marriage, it's not mandatory to have parental consent. You can
literally walk down the aisle whether the parents are happy or not.
Absolutely, without their blessing. I'm not encouraging anyone to do that, but yeah, it's a requirement. As provided that you're 21 years or above. If your age is between 16 and 20, then you definitely need a parental consent, because under the Roman Dutch law, you're not yet a major. Yes. And secondly, another requirement, apart from, I just highlighted that we don't need parental consent. Secondly, parties, potential spouses need to agree that I'm getting married to TK. You shouldn't force yourself onto me, or I shouldn't force myself onto you either.
Okay.
And it's also a requirement for the bachelor and the bachelorette to be single, meaning that you can't get married under civil law marriage if you're already someone's spouse.
It does happen. It really does happen.
Yeah, and it's actually a crime, unfortunately.
A crime.
You'll get arrested for it.
Because basically you're defrauding the other person, or
Absolutely.
You're not disclosing the full picture for the other person to make an informed decision. Interesting. So does our law allow polygamy? And what about, what if we stay together? And what if you not? Does that constitute as us being married or being spouses, or what does that mean for the ordinary people who are maslalisane?
What an interesting question. Now, before I answer the maslalisane question, let me answer this one pertaining to polygamy. Well, under civil law, under the civil law marriage, which is Roman Dutch law, polygamy is completely prohibited. And as a matter of fact, polygamy is a crime. It's called bigamy. It has been criminalized by the Penal Code Act of 2010. Penal Code of 2010. If you marry 2 wives under Roman Dutch law, I can guarantee you nothing but jail time.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But under customary law, you can marry as many wives as you want. 100, 200.
What do you do with 100 wives? Yeah.
Solomon had so many wives. I mean, yes. So as far as cohabitation is concerned, unfortunately, our both the Roman Dutch law and the customary law does not recognize cohabitation, meaning cohabiting partners do not have any legal protection. Well, in South Africa, there was a case which was decided in 2012 where they recognized cohabitation. But unfortunately, in our case, that is not the case.
That's not the case.
Yes, but I have a feeling that might be the case eventually, since we adopt quite a number of precedent from the SA jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in an instance where, say, I know this is not part of the question, but I feel like it's relevant at this point in time. Say, I'm going to give you a typical example. Say you and I get married under civil law marriage, and you don't know that I have a husband somewhere in New Zealand, maybe. And you generally don't know. Later on, say, unfortunately, God forbid, I die. And when you're busy claiming my insurance and somebody tells you, no, your marriage is invalid. Your marriage with Lerato is invalid because at the time you married Lerato had a lawfully wedded husband.
So he's entitled to all the things that I would be claiming.
Absolutely. But you can plead universal partnership. You can say to the court that I genuinely did not know that Lerato was married.
And that time Lerato is gone. You're like, how dare you?
How dare you? Yes. Yes.
Interesting. So just like you mentioned, there's a TK and a Lerato who are probably thinking they want to say, I do walk down the aisle in December. TK is probably nervous about the proposal so that he's saved up for the engagement ring and the likes. But the one conversation they want to have before all of this happens is, what contract are we getting married under? So maybe talk us through the different marital contracts with a particular focus on getting married in community of property or the antenuptial contract.
Okay. Well, like I indicated earlier, we have two types of marriages in Lesotho, which is the customary law marriage and the Roman Dutch law marriage, which is civil law marriage. And the civil law marriage is divided into two marital regimes, which is marriage, civil law marriage in community of property, and civil law marriage out of community of property. And this civil law marriage out of community of property is further divided into other subcategories, which is civil law marriage out of community of property with accruals and without accruals. Now, without any further ado, please allow me to to cast more light onto the issue of civil law marriage in community of property. That one is simple. It's common.
Yeah.
So basically, when you're married under civil law marriage in community of property, it means what's mine is yours.
And what's mine? So this also includes the debts.
Absolutely. It means that both spouses are jointly liable to the liabilities and they jointly own the assets, provided that each has an equal share of 50% and the other has an equal share of 50%. So in the event where parties have been married under civil law marriage out of community of property with accruals, this means that parties the property that they acquired as the bachelor and the bachelorette will not form part of the joint estate. In an event where, say, you and I get married and you have a BMW and I have a Mercedes-Benz before we get married, right? When we get married, that BMW and the Mercedes-Benz is not going to constitute part of the matrimonial estate. Rather, when we get married and say when we are now married, we buy a Fortuner. That Fortuner will be ours equally.
Okay.
Now that's the case where we're talking about marriage in out of community of property with accruals. We only exclude the property that was acquired prior the marital
so if
agreement.
I understand you correctly,
yes.
I have the BMW. It
yes.
will probably be an Audi.
Yes.
You have the Mercedes.
Yes.
We get married and then we buy a Fortuner.
Yes.
So my BMW remains mine.
Yes.
Your Mercedes remains yours.
Yes.
But the Fortuner is ours under that.
Absolutely.
Antenuptial, but with accrual.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
We're on the same page.
Absolutely. But when it comes to antenuptial agreement without accruals, it means that you and I will never share property nor liabilities ever. Your Mercedes-Benz or
my Audi.
Your Audi will forever be yours. My Mercedes will forever be mine, and that Fortuner will either be mine or yours.
It depends whoever bought it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Meaning that in a nutshell, antenuptial agreement without accruals, the spouses will never share property, whether they're happy or not, or whether one gave the other a full body massage or not. They'll never share property.
Sure. And just out of interest, how popular is the antenuptial without accrual in the Lesotho context?
Well, it's not so popular. you know, Lesotho, a majority of Basotho are Christians. And according to the laws of, like, the Christian laws, when parties get married, they consider themselves as one and they share... Yeah, they share their assets and liabilities equally. So the marital regime, the marriage, civil law marriage out of community of property without accruals, it's so not popular in Lesotho.
Not very popular.
Absolutely.
It's not very popular.
Absolutely.
And talking about that not being popular, I love the Twitter space that you had with Dora from Kenya and Rita from Nigeria,
yes.
where you guys were discussing marriage, divorce, and marital property. Okay, so there's one view that you shared, particularly when it comes to prenuptial agreements with accrual and without accrual, basically prenuptial agreements. And you mentioned that the perception genuinely is, when I'm thinking of getting married, ANC, antenuptial contract, is the other person is either a gold digger or secondly, the other person is either in this marriage half-heartedly or they're planning to escape. See how I use the word escape. So what are your views on ANC following from that, it is a podcast, that Twitter space, which I'll obviously also link in this particular video?
Oh, what an interesting discussion that was. Well, if my recollection serves me well, my perspective that I shared during that Twitter space was that we have this third narrative in Lesotho that if you're marrying, in fact, let me put it this way. We have this third narrative where we think that people who get married in under community of property are not, they genuinely love each other and they're not even intending to escape or to do anything deceitful. Yes. Yeah. But personally, I would advise, or rather I prefer marriage, a civil law marriage out of community of property, because when you get married in community of property, it's like you're putting your eggs in one basket.
Sure.
You know?
And you don't put your eggs in one basket.
I've never put your eggs in one basket, because if somebody trips while carrying that basket, you'll end up with nothing but shells. Sure. So when you say you and I get married out of community of property, if your property unfortunately gets bankrupt somewhere, say you're a forex trader and unfortunately you lose all of your money under forex trading, at least you have the share of my estate to survive on. Or in the event where you get bankrupt and the bank takes everything that you have, or where you are declared as an insolvent, you can still have my property to rely on. But in the event where we have put our eggs in one basket, if
it literally is gone.
If everything hits the fan, if something hits the fan, then we are doomed, because we won't have that portion of the estate that will rescue the matrimonial estate.
And I'm thinking, as you are speaking about this, there's also, you are working in corporate or you are employed somewhere, and I'm running a business. And from a business perspective, you take a lot more risks in terms of trying to build the business. Now, suddenly, we are married in community of property, and the business, or I've incurred a lot of debt in the names of the business, which is a private company, but, you know, I'm still liable for all those debts. Now, suddenly, the entire estate is literally dissolved, because now, so it's stressful. It's stressful. And I think also you mentioned something that's very important, Yaore. When we go into marriages and we sign these contracts, we think it's only about love. And why do we not see that this is actually a contract?
That's the thing. You know, a lot of us are so blinded by love when we get into this contract, and we turn a blind eye on the virtue that this is a contract. It's a legally binding contract with legally binding consequences. And we only know about this legal consequences when we're at the High Court trying to get a divorce, and we're like, oh my God, what?
What did I sign? What did I get myself into?
Because at that time, we were so madly in love. Did not even know what you're getting yourself into, only to find out at a later stage. And that gives, it's one of the reasons why we have such a rapid such a rapid increase of divorce cases, because a majority of youngsters conclude this legally binding marital contracts without knowing the legal implications behind it. And they only find out later on that, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And unfortunately, at that time is usually they usually discover it at a later stage. When it's too late.
So I think you already touched on the next question I wanted to ask. Yeah, there seems to be a high number of divorce cases in Lesotho, and for me that's a bit concerning. Which is also what's inspired this conversation between you and I is. What is happening? Why are people suddenly getting divorced at such a rapid rate? And again, what are the consequences, particularly when I am married in community of property? So I've signed this agreement, things are not working out, we've married in community of property, divorce. What are the consequences of divorce and what's happening in the country currently?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have quite a number of divorce cases, and luckily enough, today is a Wednesday. We have divorce cases I had on a Wednesday. Oh. So right now, as we're speaking,
people are cutting time.
Yeah, some jolos are being cut currently. So, well, personally, I believe that we have quite a number of divorce cases because, like I said earlier, people don't know, they don't take time to learn about the marital regime that they are binding themselves to. And after they have already binded themselves to that particular marital regime, they then find out, oh no, this is not what I wanted. You know, I'm going to give you a typical example. In an event where we're married under a community of property and where you're working and I'm not, one of the requirements is that you're supposed to provide me with spousal maintenance.
Yeah.
And when you find out that, no, I have to give Lerato a certain portion of my changura for her to survive since we're married in community of property, then you start getting all hostile and you're like, no, this is my money.
But how? But yours is mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's when you start running to court wanting a divorce because you didn't know that. You didn't even take an initiative to know that at the time you were saying yes.
Sure.
So where people are married in community of property, when we divorce, at the event of the divorce, property is supposed to be divided equally.
Yeah.
The other spouse is supposed to take 50% and the other is supposed to take 50%. But in some jurisdictions, you may find out that some courts tend to look at which spouse contributed the most to the joint estate. And it's quite unfortunate to housewives because what we do as women, because we are nurturing and we're nurturing in nature, we'll be taking care of you, making sure that when you go to work, your shed is clean, you have lunchbox, absolutely, so that you can acquire money. But when at the end of the day, when we get divorced, then now TK is going to get a large portion of the estate because he's the one who contributed financially to the estate. And some courts turn a blind eye on the fact that TK
have made that money.
Absolutely, it was because
and when you do come back from a hectic day at work as the guy, who soothes you, who motivates, who encourages you, so that emotional contribution is often overlooked.
Absolutely, most courts turn a blind eye on that fact. Sure. They usually pay a sharp attention to the fact that they look at the spouse who contributed financially to the joint estate. And let me also highlight this point. I know it's not part of the question, but I feel like it's relevant. Yes. Yeah. In Lesotho, we have two grounds for divorce, which is divorce on the grounds of malicious deception and divorce on the ground of adultery.
Oh, okay.
Yes, where another spouse has been divorced on the grounds of adultery. Let me laugh.
An adult in Lesotho.
Yeah, absolutely. Where you are an adulterous spouse, sometimes you may forfeit your share of the matrimonial estate.
Sure.
So for those cheating spouses, be careful, guys. If you want your property, be careful, because if you get caught, and also say in the event where it's so deep. And also let me highlight this point. Say you and I get married, right? And you find that I'm cheating you with a particular a colleague of mine. And after finding out that I am cheating on you with that particular person, but we sleep together, then automatically you cannot approach the court and now seek divorce on the grounds of adultery. The court will say that you have condoned it. You slept with me knowing that I was cheating on you. So if somebody cheats on you and you decide to divorce them, don't even touch them. Rush to court before touching them.
Sure.
Because the moment you
that is a podcast on itself.
Absolutely.
Sure. And the second one was, so the first one is adultery and the second one is desertion. Desertion.
Yes. And also I remember, now that we're talking about consequences of divorce, in the event where we now have children, in particular minor children, the court also has to determine custody of those minor children. Now that we're going to live separately, who's going to live with those children? Each parent has a right to have access to their children. So in the event where we now live separately, one spouse will be given full custody, while the other one is just given reasonable access. And where you have been given full custody, I'm saying this because I've seen it happen a lot. Women, it's unfortunate that is done by us women. And that is not allowed under our law. It's completely prohibited.
Would you say it's because of the hurt from the divorce, because of their issues with their husband, that they now use the kids to control, or what would be some of the contributing factors?
In my experience, that is usually the case. Because there's a sort of saying that says, when yes, we usually use children as the pawns for our matrimonial battle. And you end up like children who come from divorced families end up developing, although gradually, they end up developing this psychological trauma that usually affects them in the long run. Yes. And I would like to urge whoever is intending to get married, or whoever is already married who's intending to get divorced, that whenever you decide to end things with your spouse, please don't involve your kids.
Don't involve the kids.
Don't even involve them in your trauma. As hard as you are, spare them the trauma.
I think the second last question that I want to ask is, if I'm now married in community of property and I just listened to this podcast episode, I'm like, no, I should have actually been with the ANC with or without accrual. Am I able to change that, or am I tied to this contract that I've signed?
Absolutely, you can change. You can change, but you have to convince the court about that. It's usually the case. There's a particular case, I won't mention it, but there's a particular case that I can recall at the back of my mind where those two spouses were married in community of property, and unfortunately the other spouse was addicted to gambling.
Sure.
So he spent 90% of the matrimonial money on gambling.
Sure.
And he used to lose big time.
Sure.
And the wife was like, no. I can't continue. Is spending my money on your poker and know. So that lady approached the court, the High Court in particular, and she sought her marriage to be converted from marriage in community of property to marriage out of community of property. Now, before that conversion, we have to separate the property first, because by virtue of you being married in community of property, it means that already your property is joined. So we need to separate your assets and your liabilities before we separate, or rather before we convert your marital regime into that marriage out of community of property.
So it's almost like you divorce and then you get remarried again.
Yeah, more like that.
No, so I think we've reached the end of this episode. What are your closing remarks? Words of encouragement, words of a quote that you want to leave the viewers with, tips that you want to leave them with. So any closing remarks just to wrap up this amazing conversation?
Thank you. Well, love is a beautiful thing, and marriage is also a beautiful thing. From my perspective as a Christian, I believe that marriage is a holy matrimony. So I urge all of your viewers, since this is quite a divine agreement, to take that time to learn about this agreement before they bind themselves into it, so that they know what they're getting themselves into, so that they maneuver around the types of marital regime they would want to be binded with. Take your time to know, okay, maybe I want to get married under customary law, or maybe I want to get married under civil law. Don't just go into it simply because I know by speaking of which, I wish. Let me make it as an assignment to your viewers. How disa lenyalo? I know it's not part of the question, but I feel like it's important.
Perfectly fine.
Yes. Usually how people, spouses who were initially married under customary law marriage, and now they solemnize their marriage into a civil law marriage, right? And little do they know that when they do that, they're changing the whole picture of their marital regime.
Sure.
You know? And also, apart from that, guys. You had me when I was speaking about the requirements of a legally binding customary law marriage. It's not a legally binding, it's not a requirement. So you been that does not mean you're married. Take your time to learn more about your marital regime. Yeah, because a stitch in time says 9, honestly. Yes.
See why you need to come back. Now uncle needs to be like, wow, okay, thank you I don't know if you're done, but thank you very, very, very much for such an energizing yet such educational and informative conversations. So I'll definitely have you back on the podcast. I know we have something planned for October. I won't say what, but there's a surprise coming in October. So guys, if Ohlabesunku or Maspoti or Raspoti, whatever the case may be, it is very important for you to familiarize yourself with the different marital contracts before you say I do, before you buy that ring, before you do that. The one thing that we always do is we rush for premarital counseling. I think another one that's also very important is financial planning before you get to that point, because the other thing that contributes to people losing or ending their marriages is the finances, which we seldom speak about. So let me know in this video what you thought about this video. If you're married, if you're thinking of getting married, if you're divorced, leave a comment below and let us know what your experience has been. And of course, if you like this conversation, give it a thumbs up, because we need to get this video trending and this conversation trending, because it's very, very important. And then secondly, leave a comment below. I've mentioned that. We're trying to grow, guys. We're trying to grow. This beautiful aesthetic, these amazing guests need to be fed, collected, and all of that jazz. So we need the money. And how do we make the money? Well, if you subscribe, which is free, by the way, so hit that subscribe button, share it with family, friends, and let the community of trailblazers grow and become bigger. A big shout out to my guests. Thank you so much for being here. A big shout out to my crew, Matsusa Photography, and of course, myself. First, I'd like to thank myself for being so amazing. Anyway, guys, until the next video, love, peace, and money. Signing out. See you in the next video. Cheers. You've been listening to Money Adventures with TK. I want to hear from you. Don't be shy to leave a comment, to share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Escapes with TK, and follow me on all social media platforms. Remember, money is an adventure. Let's enjoy the ride.